Hello, everyone. Really glad that you're here. Really appreciate your coming out for a great Dreamforce. We have a fantastic panel here today. They're full of thought leaders across civil society. But really, this panel, it's about them, but it's really about you. You are the leaders that we're looking to shape the world we're going to live in. And we really want to ask the hard questions about what that world is going to look like. You know, we are part of this fourth industrial revolution where everything is connected to everything else. And there's some profound questions that are being asked. And we've got the right panel to at least think across silos to get new thinking and fresh breath into the dialogue. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel that have come from all around the world, really. We have someone from Europe. We have someone from New York. So why don't you all come on out? Thank you. Okay, so we have Tara Lyons from the Partnership for AI, Father Eric Salobir, who is with Optic Network, Commissioner Sharon Bowen with the CFTC, now with Seneca Women, and our very own Richard Socher, who is our Chief Scientist here at Salesforce. So thank you very much. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. We really are excited to have you to talk about AI and machine learning and all of these emerging technologies. Why don't we just very quickly go down the line and talk a little bit about what each and every one of your organizations are doing to provide a ethical, safe, sustainable, inclusive future.
Sure. Thanks for having us here. My name is Tara Lyons. I am the executive director of an organization called the Partnership on Artificial Intelligence. And we are a nonprofit organization actually based here in San Francisco. We're a multi-stakeholder initiative, and we're a consortium comprised of over 70 member institutions spanning all sorts of different sectors and disciplines, coming from civil society and advocacy organizations, large for-profit industry companies like Salesforce and a lot of others, and a lot of academic institutions too. So our mission really is sort of part and parcel with the purpose of the conversation today. We are keenly focused on the responsible use and development of artificial intelligence technologies and working to commission research and generate practice in our member institutions against that mission area.
Great. Father Eric.
So thank you. I will not try to answer this question at the scale of the whole Catholic Church because it's a lot, it's big. I mean, the Church is the first provider of education and healthcare worldwide, and also the institution is facing some key challenges, ethical challenges currently. But let's say to stay in this conversation at the scale of Optic, let's say we have two key responsibilities. First one, we are a think tank, so we help people to think different about impact and ethics of technology. And so, for example, we help them to de-zoom, to have a full picture of the impact of the implementation of those technologies in the society. And we also help them to understand that compliance is not enough. Ticking the boxes of your listed by your ethical committee doesn't put you on the safe side. And what people want to know is, what are your core values? Why do you do things? And actually, so that's the first thing, let's say, helping them to think different. And we also a do tank, so we interact with developers of those technologies to see how they can answer more easily, let's say, face the challenges of the society and solve problems. And so currently, we work a lot on the concept of ethics by design. And the point is just to help people not to have to choose between being profitable or having a positive impact, but try to put all of that together and to see how it's possible to make added value using and respecting core values.
Great. Commissioner Bowen.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I have the privilege of thinking about this issue wearing really different lenses. I'm a former commissioner of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. I serve on the board of the Intercontinental Exchange. I'm also part of the senior leadership team of Seneca Women. But one of the things I think all of these organizations, and in fact all organizations, should have in common in thinking about this is the importance of transparency. I think that's important for every organization. I think the second most important thing in terms of our responsibility is to make sure we have equal access and opportunity. we shouldn't assume that the playing field is level for all of us. And whether you're talking about the financial markets or whether you're talking about your own organizations, making sure that each individual has equal access and opportunity. And the third thing I think we need to do is to make sure we have proper incentives in place to make sure that people are in the same boat, if you will, in terms of making sure that you're part of the same mission statement. And then finally, I would say, I think the concept of having a safe, sustainable, inclusive organization, frankly, is everyone's job. I think too often we depend on the CEO or the chief diversity officer or the chief inclusion officer of an organization. And I think in many respects, organizations miss the point that this should be about every employee being engaged and being part of the solution.
Great. Richard.
So I'm the chief scientist at Salesforce, and so I wear a couple of different hats. I'm leading the research group in mostly artificial intelligence, and then helping infuse those breakthroughs into a variety of our different products. And we realize, especially in AI, ethical issues arise very quickly now that it actually works, and we see it in all our different products. And there are a lot of issues on potential biases in data sets that we want to make aware. So we're hiring a chief ethical and humane use officer at Salesforce, and really, I think, realize the responsibility that we have as a platform, helping hundreds of thousands of other companies also think through these issues, both as they use our own platform, as well as work on their core expertise in AI.
Great, so such a diverse panel here, and we're really lucky to have you all here, so thank you for coming the long way. Commissioner Bowen, why don't you walk us through your thoughts about the emerging technologies and their impact on the financial markets? It's been in the news a bit this week.
Yeah, it's a pretty big topic, frankly. Our markets have really evolved from the days of the open outcry markets, of the commodities markets, or the New York Stock Exchange floor. We had specialists in the marketplace. And so technology has resulted in transactions being conducted at faster and faster speeds. With that, it brings certain challenges. You may think, how fast is too fast? And so we have challenges whether we're talking about algorithmic trading in our markets, high-frequency trading in our markets, the impact that those types of technologies have in terms of a level playing field. At the same time, we know that technology enables us to have much more liquidity, a lot more competition, and therefore cheaper costs to the customer and to end users. So there are many benefits in that respect. Data analytics is extremely important. Before, and this is not to replace, obviously, human judgment, but data has become powerful in helping us to make policy decisions as regulators, and for organizations to make decisions, decision-making as well. But how we use that data, I think, also is equally important. And in terms of the financial markets, our job is to protect the integrity of our marketplace. And so to the extent that we use artificial intelligence and machine learning, it helps us to really sort of ferret out, if you will, sort of bad behavior. It's a tool for regulators to use. It's a way for the marketplace also to use that information to mitigate, I guess, risk in the marketplace.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Tara, so she's talked a lot about transparency. That's a really important topic. To some of us, AI and machine learning might seem hard to access. Is transparency one of the topics on the mind at the Partnership for AI? What are the topics that this group is coming together to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we were founded back in 2016 was when this whole initiative was announced. In the last year or so, we became operational. And the organizations driving the founding of the partnership were Apple, Amazon, Facebook, IBM, Microsoft, and Google. Our board also includes organizations like the ACLU, the MacArthur Foundation, nonprofit organizations like OpenAI, and some independent academic board directors. And when they started the organization, they were really keenly focused on kind of dividing the AI space, which is galactical in its scope, especially if you're a technologist, into different categories, discrete categories for this community that I talked a little bit about before, actually getting to work on. So those categories for us include issues spanning a whole range of areas of focus. We do work on AI, labor, and the economy, or the future of work kind of suite of issues. We have work ongoing on issues of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which is another sort of galaxy of issues unto itself. We have a set of work happening around safety and safety-critical artificial intelligence.
Why don't you describe that a little bit?
What safety entails? So, for us, and actually this is an interesting study in the way that our community approaches problem solving. When you get a bunch of technologists, lawyers, philosophers, sociologists, anthropologists, et cetera, into a room together, the sort of first order issue is actually coming to a common language across all those different disciplines and organizational perspectives about what it is exactly we're talking about when we name a term like safety or when we name a term like transparency. So what PAI is doing in the immediacy in the work that we're starting to conduct is establishing a common framework for talking and thinking about these issues, which spans organizations across sectors and also spans disciplinary boundaries. And that's really important as you're thinking about configuring best practices, which is really solely that's principally what we're focused on as an organization. So it looks something like standard setting, but it's a little bit, it takes place a little bit prior to that, where there's still a conversation to be shaped around the way that practice should be formulated and implemented in organizations like the technology companies that founded this institution, and certainly how those practices should be interrogated and formulated in collaboration and conversation with these other disciplines.
So, Father Eric, technology might not be the first thing people think of when they think of the Catholic Church. And I'm wondering if you could just address why religion should be at the table in this dialogue.
Yeah, for sure, there's no Vatican tech. Yeah, so we're a bit far from that, let's say.
But you do hackathons, right?
But we do hackathons, and time to time, in French we say, far from the mountain, you see better the mountain. Mm-hmm. And so just to get a bigger, big picture, time to time, it's also good to have a bit of distance, and I would say 2,000 years of track records makes different perspective. Mm-hmm. And for sure, I think what the religions have to bring, it's a new set of questions. Instead of just providing answers, I think that we come very often with a new set of questions, a new way to think about ethics, which is, I said, it's not only a compliance, it's not only consequences, it's something more universal. And actually, religions were challenged all the time by the society since centuries. And so we know that everything we do builds a kind of society. So my key question when I meet people, stakeholders from the tech companies or policymakers, which kind of society do we build using those technologies? And that's what we can bring, I would say, in the conversation. So new questions, a different approach, and also perhaps a good understanding of what it is to be human together. We were talking about having an inclusive society, having a fair society. That's something that actually we know how to deal with, even if we were trapped many times, and perhaps because we failed many times, we know where are the pitfalls, I would say, and we know how the human being works. And very often that's what is missing in the conversations among I would say, very smart people, but time to time a kind of wisdom coming a bit from the past.
It's really interesting. We have a builder on the panel, a creator. Why don't you, Richard, walk us through, how do you create an ethical, inclusive, safe algorithm? Sounds like a challenge.
So ethics is a mindset, not a checklist. There's not like, oh, just do these 5 things and then you'll have an ethical algorithm. What's also important to understand, especially for AI algorithms, is that they're only as good as the training data that they get. So whenever there's a biased algorithm, it wasn't because some evil programmer sat there and said, oh, I don't like women, they shouldn't get a loan. I'm going to program something against this algorithm giving loans to women. What happens is they have an abstract algorithm, and then they're getting a training data set based on past behavior, usually human behavior, and that data set will include certain biases. And so if in the past an organization was part of redlining and didn't want to give loans to black people in the United States, or just historically didn't have as many female applicants for loans in a certain country or something like that, then those algorithms will take that training data and then learn from that and then make predictions based on that training data. And that's where we see the majority of the issues, and that's where we think the most important part is actually educating companies that use our platform to think about what kinds of biases could be in their data set, what kinds of minorities might be missing, and then basically try to improve, get better training data, or try explicitly to mitigate those kinds of effects. And so it starts really with the mindset and thinking through the potential issues that could be in your data set as they're touching people's lives. And so we have, actually in the United States, some very bad algorithms that are running in a judicial system where you want to define like who should get parole or how long should people be in prison based on previous days in jail. And it turns out if you're poor and you can't pay for a parking ticket, you might have to spend a day in jail. And now that will make you more likely to go to prison for something else. And that's just a very unfair system. And so when AI and machine learning and really just statistics and every technology touches human lives, people should think about all the stakeholders that are involved and how they are affected by that.
You mentioned that there's some bad algorithms in the United States, and you mentioned the Justice Department types of algorithms. Are there places in the world that are doing it right that can be a model for us?
It's such a new technology, and it's only now getting started to be used broadly. I think the most important thing at this point is almost to have a beginner's mindset, because it is really, we're seeing the beginning of a new technology. And in some ways you can think of this as if when the internal combustion engine was invented, people are already thinking about pollution. They didn't, and that led to suboptimal outcomes. And now that we are seeing AI already getting started to be used more and more in more and more places, we are thinking about those issues. So it's really just crucial to have a beginner's mindset and to constantly question yourself, how is this algorithm affecting people's lives? And really, how is your technology in general affecting people's lives? And that goes, this training data issue sounds kind of abstract, but it's very concrete. When YouTube makes a recommendation for a video that you see, and you watched one conspiracy video, they know you like conspiracy videos, they're optimizing for clicks, they're seeing in the training data, if I see people click on this video, they're probably also gonna look at these other conspiracy videos. And then you go down some rabbit hole and you see more conspiracies. And so you need to really carefully think about what's going on in your training data and how is that affecting your product.
Well, Tara, it's so interesting. You've got so many different companies in this partnership for AI together. We think of them as competitors, but they're coming together, for a common cause. What are some of the big projects? There's a term in Silicon Valley called moonshot that we like to use a lot for the big, audacious projects. What are the moonshots that the Partnership for AI is doing together?
Sure, yeah, so at PAI, we kind of think of ourselves as a moonshot, to be honest, just because of the challenge of getting the competitors who wrought this organization together to collaborate in the ways that they're now showing themselves to be capable of. So I think our contextualized in that broader framing of all of our work sort of being that sort of ambitiously scaled type of project. I would say that, just springing off actually of a point that Richard earlier made, this concept of embedding, and actually this was also touched on earlier by Commissioner Bowen as well, but this project of embedding inclusion as a sort of full stack priority across an organization is something we're really trying to help equip our member institutions to be able to do. And that's a project that requires not just technology companies, whether in competition or collaboration with each other, but also the sort of meaningful participation of representation of affected communities, civil society organizations and advocates sort of spanning this ecosystem of concerns and challenges associated with AI, and also its opportunities. So I think one moonshot for us is in making sure that the work we do is really meaningfully influenced by those types of voices. And it's not a muscle that the technology industry has traditionally demonstrated being able to exert. I think this is sort of a new era. This is a repositioning of the way that we're thinking about the technology development process. It's not just about product designers and engineers or hacking your way through something, sort of out-geeking a problem. It's also about consulting with the communities that technology is influencing, and situating work done in the product development context in context of the situations in which it will be scaled. So
I would love to be in some of the meetings where you're trying to sort through these divisions and problems. And so I'm very curious, since you have so many different kinds of stakeholders, what are some of the disagreements at the table?
Well, so I mean, as with any organization that is, comprised of large corporations and advocates and civil society organizations, some of which traditionally have been working not necessarily in opposition to them, but certainly in a broader societally scaled conversation about the way that industry does its work. I think that a big opportunity for us that we have ahead is in making sure that we're able to kind of bridge that gap and equip these different organizations with again, you'll hear me say this a lot, sort of lingua franca, this common language that's needed not just to cross disciplines in conversation with one another, but also the different types of institutions we have working on the projects that they're working on. So I think that's a really big project for us, and it's not necessarily an explicit disagreement, but I think there's always danger of there being rifts that open along the lines of sectors in any multidisciplinary organization, or excuse me, multi-stakeholder organization. There's a lot of multis in the work that we do. So I think that's a big one. I think there's also just disagreements in the technology community about how to deal with some of the sort of, the big questions ahead on AI. And I don't think those are going to disappear anytime soon. And our hope really isn't to quash those and make sure that there's perfect agreement across the spectrum, really to kind of, on the other hand, rather to tease out the disagreement, to really kind of give them airtime, to play out, and to give all the players in this ecosystem the space that they need to talk to each other in a sort of a vulnerable way that allows organizations to really be collaborative about designing the best answers instead of confrontational.
That's great. Father Eric, I've read that you worry at night about machine learning and AI. And so I'm curious, what is it that worries you as we move into this future? What keeps you up at night about this technology?
I would say first, I'm more enthusiastic than I'm worried. I'm really a techno enthusiast, that's for sure. My point is just to try to flag the pitfalls, just to be sure that we can enjoy more what the technology can bring, positive, everything the positive the technology can bring. I would say the danger for us is less related to the technology than to the way we use it as human beings and as the society. And for example, Richard, you were mentioning the use of AI in criminal justice. You can have better algorithms, you can have better data, but at the end of the day, you know that there are some characteristics of this technology which are embedded in the technology and which make this technology proper for some use, but not for other ones. For example, the fact that it reinforces the same tendencies, for sure, it has to be taken in consideration, and something probably cannot be done with that. I mean, you cannot do everything with a hammer time to time. You need a screwdriver, or the contrary. And more or less, that's what happens. And very often, I would say that people who implement those technologies, and they are not specifically from the tech companies, but also, I mean, policymakers or people in the government, administration, and so on, they don't take that enough in consideration. And so, if it's not the right tool which is used, we don't get the right outcome. And we have those biases, we have those difficulties. And I think that, unfortunately, when it comes to the sovereign activities of the states, so justice, defense, law enforcement, it's super, super tricky. So we try to work on that. So what we do is more or less the next step from what the Partnership on AI does. So trying to work also with regulators and policymakers to be sure that those technologies, let's say that our society is mature enough to welcome those technologies. So the point is not, is the technology good enough, but is the society ready to welcome it, and is it the best way to use the technology? If not, perhaps we have not to use it immediately, but try to find, let's say, wait for the next step, and then we will be ready. So that's more or less what we work on.
Well, we have a former regulator on the panel, and so I'm sure you would like to jump in on your ideas of, can we really regulate this, and is it possible to, via regulation, create a safe, sustainable, inclusive future?
I think it's important. Regulation, we definitely need rules of the road. Just because you can go 120 miles an hour doesn't mean you should do that in a school zone. And so I think regulation can serve a really important function in making sure that we have a safe environment for everyone. At the same time, we don't want to stifle innovation. And so there's always going to be this tendency to balance innovation in technology versus consumer protection. In the best of all worlds, you have excellent self-regulation. But having said that, there isn't a common language. People don't have the same goals in mind. And so there are inherent conflicts of interest with some organizations, whether they use this technology for good or bad. For example, whether we're talking about Bitcoin or blockchain, at the CFTC, we had launched the CFTC lab to better understand the virtual currencies and Bitcoin. And while you can say a lot about the pros and cons of that, it's clear at least that the blockchain technology has lots of great legs. And it's equally clear that the transparency that we can bring to a regulated exchange, which has been proposed, I think will make it a lot more viable to make sure that we've got the integrity, the trust, and the confidence of the individuals to make sure that the playing field is level. But we also need cooperation globally. This is not a US issue. Our markets are independent across the globe. And so the common language has to go beyond our borders. And I think some governments are taking different positions on how you deal with ICOs and how you deal with disruptive technologies, if you will. But I think the key is to have the effective dialogue and to make sure we try to achieve the right balance, with investor protection, consumer protection, it being in the best interest without stifling innovation.
So Richard, do you agree? It sounds like this panel thinks regulations might be in order. What type of regulation should there be?
So I think it's important to understand that it doesn't make sense to regulate all of AI in the abstract. But as AI touches human lives in specific industries and verticals, it makes sense to regulate it for those kinds of use cases. So generally, regulating all of computer vision algorithms that classify images doesn't really make that much sense. But when you want to apply a computer vision algorithm to medical use cases and want to identify breast cancer or classify brain bleeds and head CT scans and things like that, then you need to go through the FDA and have them really verify that you're at least as accurate as a doctor. And that also can be tricky because doctors aren't always accurate. Being more accurate than even a panel of like the top 3 doctors in the world on a certain issue might not make you 100% accurate. So there are issues then still, but in general, we do need regulation, I think, both in terms of the data that we have. So GDPR is a good step in the right direction, though it is this fine balance between innovation and not trying to suppress it, as well as have consumer protection. It is actually kind of tough for some smaller companies to be GDPR compliant in Europe. And so there's this fine balance. But in general, on the data set side, we do need regulation for privacy issues and things like that. And then on the AI side and the application side, we do need to work with the regulatory bodies, be it the FDA or the transportation authorities when it comes to self-driving cars. And then there's also the macro scale of thinking about the jobs and the impact on jobs and how do we, I think, worry about that transition. I think the future where we have a lot more automation is clearly great. Like over 150 years ago or so, over 90% of people work in agriculture. I'm fairly confident 90% of the room is pretty happy that they didn't have to work in the field every day, right? But when all of a sudden you have tractors everywhere, and certainly that rollout was slower than the rollout you can have for AI because it's software, not hardware. What do those farmers do as they're losing their job? You need to think through political systems and social safety nets and healthcare, and especially education, to bring people on board with this transition and make that transition as smooth as possible.
Baristas beware. I was on Market Street just this morning, and there was this automated coffee machine that was just doing it all, everything that a barista does. So yes, displacement's happening even on the streets of San Francisco today. So what about the rest of you in terms of things that keep you up at night, concern you? I'd be really curious just to see what concerns you, and then maybe a little bit about what each of your organization is doing concretely at a granular level, something that you're proud of. Tara?
Sure. Man, that's a tough question. I think this is a theme that's been drawn through all the discussion that we've had today on this panel, but I am really concerned about the sort of challenge ahead insofar as connecting affected communities fairly disenfranchised from the technology development process directly to the types of conversations that we all have the luxury of being a part of here in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco. I'm pretty sure that's the only robotic barista, it certainly would be in San Francisco. But I think that the types of discussions that we have here in the Valley, certainly in the tech industry more generally, sometimes can confine themselves to somewhat a bubble. And so I think it's really important, especially as we're talking about the ways in which AI can have discrete and definable impacts on these communities, that we find a way to really kind of bring them directly into the conversation. So that would be my worry. I think for our part at PAI, like I said before, we're really working hard on that problem. So part of how we've done it is by directly sponsoring the deep involvement of the nonprofit organizations we have involved in our membership. So we're a global body. We're comprised of over 60% nonprofit institutions, even though we were founded by a lot of large technology companies. And making sure that they're invited to conversation is not sufficient for the work that we're doing. We really have to directly sponsor their deep involvement in those conversations, and again, make sure that there's a common language that all the participants are speaking around the sort of the direct subject of the work that we're grappling with. So that's part of what we're giving thought to at PAI. There's a lot of different directions, I think, for that work in the future, and in the immediate term, it's just meant that we're very conscious about making sure that we're not just inviting people to show up at the table, but we're really making sure that they get there.
Great. Father Eric?
Yeah, I would say for me, the key point is to be sure that we build a society which is inclusive enough. In two ways, perhaps. First of all, we see that we used to have, let's say, a digital divide, but now it's a tech divide between continents and countries and people in the same country. And we know that the more people are in need, the more the technology can help them to solve their problem. The problem is between people having those problems and people having potential solutions, a connection is not so easy. That's why we've started to organize hackathons at, let's say, a global scale, to act local and think global. And because we have the opportunity, we have the chance to have a real international institution with NGOs everywhere in the world directly on the field working with the people, we try to leverage this experience to identify what are the real problems and how to solve that and then scale up those solutions, let's say helping those big NGOs, let's say, to implement those technologies to help as many people as possible. So that's one point. The second one is, when I say inclusive, it means also that if this technology is only designed by the same type of people, I mean, studying in the same places, coming from the same places, and so on, I'm not so sure that it will be relevant for everybody and it will fit. I mean, one size doesn't fit all. And we see that people coming from some countries in Africa and Latin America will probably not be able to use those technologies just because it's too far from their mindset, it's too far from their culture. So my question, and that's also what we're also working on, is how can we bridge the gap between the people to help more people to be in the loop of the design of those technologies, not only of the use of those technologies, in a way to be sure that those technologies will really be suitable for everybody.
Okay, Commissioner Bowen.
Of course, wearing my former regulatory hat,
Okay.
my biggest concern, we may have solved for the last financial crisis, but I'm really worried about the next one. And the threat of cyber attacks and hacking are real threats, I think, to our financial markets. And in that respect, I think we need a global solution and global cooperation. Don't think we can be isolated in our decision-making in this regard, because, there's no boundaries in terms of where people want to hack markets or where they would like to attack our systems. From sort of where in my head, in terms of diversity and inclusion, one of the things I'm most proud about that we're doing at Seneca Women is that we have just created our first mobile platform for companies to use to engage their employees. It's a powerful tool, I think, for companies to really take the pulse of their organizations and for employees to be able to engage with the company about helpful tips and tactics and ways to overcome obstacles. Because I think the 360-degree conversation is really important. I think, for organizations, there's a real disconnect in that sense in terms of things being much more from the top down as opposed to from the bottom up. And so I think, to the extent that we have tools to empower our employees and others to, bring their purpose to work every day, I think that's really meaningful.
Great. Richard?
So I think in terms of worries, it's really about the omni or dual or omni-use capabilities of AI that worry me a little bit. I've done a lot of research over the last decade in artificial intelligence and just getting algorithms to be more accurate. But once they're accurate and they work and we open source them and now everybody can use them, it's very easy to misuse them. But now the genie's out of the bottle, and like you want the good uses, but you don't want some of the bad uses. You don't want it to be used for military and autonomous weapons and things like that, but it's the same underlying technology that can help you identify breast cancer. It's literally sometimes the exact same algorithm that could say shoot, not shoot versus this type of breast cancer or not. And so you want the good uses, you don't want the bad uses. And in general, we have a platform or a platform company too, and we don't always look exactly into customers' data. In fact, we never do. Trust is our number one value. And so we want to just educate people and help them be part of this conversation and think about the ethical implications. And so on the positive side, I feel very fortunate to be part of Salesforce because we have, I think, coming from the top, a lot of really great values. Mark talks about stakeholder capitalism instead of shareholder capitalism, talks about how the business of business is to improve the state of the world, and that seeps through all the values and into all our many employees. And so we have trust and equality, diversity as real values. I'm really excited that Trailhead, our learning platform, is part of our AI strategy to help people gain new skills, to help also companies empower their employees to gain new skills, as maybe parts of their job will just get augmented, but maybe others in service could, in the next couple of years, get replaced. And so I think there's a lot to be proud of and happy at Salesforce with the values and that we bring into the world.
And it's Salesforce that brought this group together. I want to close. We just have a few minutes left, but I'm going to go back down the line here one more time. There's a really great Wall Street Journal article about a week ago that talked a little bit about the difference between humanity and what AI and machine learning can do. Expressly, it pointed out that machines, even the best machines, even the best AI, doesn't have empathy, can't really be creative, that there will always need to be a creator or a maker behind there calling the shots. I'm wondering about your thoughts, Richard, on that. Do you agree with that? And is this idea that it's the humans that drive the values in all of this AI, is that really important for the future as we design?
I do think so. I do think it's important. And in some ways, I think AI will help us also be able to focus more on what makes us uniquely human, that is having empathy with each other. You can have an algorithm do a lot of things for you and automate a lot of things, but if you want another person to be empathetic to your situation, you cannot program that almost by definition. You can pretend better and better in the future, but there are a lot of things where you require empathy and creativity, and those kinds of jobs I think will be valued more and more in the future. And in that sense, and with the right economic and political systems, I think humanity is bound to benefit a lot from AI in the future.
Great. Commissioner Bowen.
Well, there's never a substitute for good judgment. And so I think the human element will always be important. At the same time, I think we really have to have everyone have a seat at the table. It can't be an audience of people who all think the same way, who look the same way. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important that we have everyone participate in this discussion. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I think we will be solving problems that could be made worse, frankly, in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Father Eric.
To my mind, I agree. Let's say that the machine cannot do everything. The problem is, as human beings, we are lazy, to be honest, and we are happy not to make decisions. We want to be free, but we are so happy if someone else makes the decision. And very often we see that if the machine can order the pizza, it's better whatever the pizza is or wherever it comes from. But I think it can be the same in other, let's say, fields for more tricky questions, even related to defense and so on, because choosing or engaging a target is a difficult decision. So time to time, I think that the danger could be not from the side of the technology, but from the side of the human being, to lose or to let its agency or our agency go away and not to take our responsibilities. And I think that that's exactly what makes us human. Is to let's say, face our responsibilities and make our own decisions. So we need to be sure that the way we use those technologies, especially AI, which is super powerful, will be in a way which will really empower us instead of, let's say, dehumanizing us just because we will let things go. And just to be sure that we keep the control and we use those super powerful technologies to build what we want to build, instead of being just in the flow, let's say.
Thank you. Tara.
I guess I'll just add to a lot of points I already agree with by saying that I think one of the promises of AI is that it has the promise of allowing us to solve a lot of decisions at scale. And I think what's interesting about that is that it opens up new opportunities for us to think about new ways of making decisions and organizing organizations around that promise and the potentiality of the impact that this technology is going to have. So again, I think those are muscles that a lot of organizations are in the midst of growing right now, and I hope that entities like ours can be helpful to that process. But more than anything, returning to your original point, I think technology is nothing if not a set of decisions that are made by human beings. And this room is full of a lot of those human beings. This panel has a lot of those human beings on it. And in general, I think it's really important to hold close to that empowerment and just remember the power that we have to enact change on the systems that we're talking about.
Great. So with our last 2.5 minutes, I'm just going to quickly go down the line and ask you, are you optimistic, are you pessimistic, or are you both?
Net optimistic, absolutely.
Okay.
For sure, I'm optimistic. Just pay attention about the little dangers, and for sure we'll make our ways. Yeah.
Great.
Definitely an optimist. I think we all better be.
Okay.
I'm optimistic in the long term. I'm worried a little bit in the short term.
Can you explain that a little bit?
What I mentioned before, in that the transition as AI automates more and more jobs, the economical systems, social safety nets, and healthcare and things like that are sometimes too tied to jobs. And this is maybe my European background in Germany, where we have free healthcare, free education. Those kinds of things will help alleviate that in those countries. And if more countries are sort of helping people with the transition, as certain kinds of jobs will get automated, as they have to re-educate themselves and learn new kinds of skills for the jobs of the future, as long as that's happening, then I'm also more optimistic.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. We so appreciate it. Everyone, let's give them some applause. Thank you. Really, thank you for coming. Really, really do appreciate it. Okay.